one of the most important events that I ever happened to me in my whole life was it was in 2003. Um, I had just read Richard Koch's book, The 80-20 Principle, which is one of the best business books ever written, period. And I got to page 14 and I'm like, hey, wait a minute. He makes this throwaway comment about how this all has something to do with chaos theory. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. That means I started connecting all these dots and I go, hey, 80-20 must be a calculus formula. What's the calculus formula? I started looking around. I couldn't find it. And I was like, how would you figure this out? And I was stuck. So I was obsessing about this. It was a Friday. And all day long, I have a very obsessive personality. And I was thinking about this all day long. And the other thing I was thinking about that day was 3 days before, I had done a teleseminar. Remember when it was like a telephone thing and not a webinar thing? And I had sold $11,000 of stuff in 1 hour, which at the time was just a miraculous amount of money. And I was like, hey, I wonder if I could use my business to help this little project in Mozambique, which was the 18th poorest country in the world, because my brother-in-law was running this project there. So all day long, I'm thinking about calculus and Mozambique. And there was this music thing at church, and I went to it. And so they're playing, it's like this Pink Floyd-y kind of music, and I'm just in La La Land, and I'm just thinking about calculus and Mozambique. And all of a sudden, I look up, and this woman is walking straight towards me. She's black. I've never seen her in my life. I don't know who she is. She sticks out her hand. She says, hi, my name is Vivian, and the Lord gave me a word for you. Now, up to this point, I have never had anything like this happen to me. Where I grew up, they didn't have anything like that. It's like, don't bring any of that stuff around here. She goes, the Lord told me that you're very, very good at math, and you're working some kind of formula, some kind of equation, some kind of invention, and you're going to figure it out. You just keep working on it. You're going to figure it out. And I just stared at her like, holy cow. And I looked around like, how many people in this room are working on a math problem right now? Dang. And she turned to walk away. And then she spun around again. She goes, oh, and he told me something else. You want to support missions, and God is going to bless your business so you can support missions. And okay, 2 in a row, baby. She nailed me. And I just stared at her with my mouth open. And I go, if only you knew. And she goes, he knows. And she just walked away. And I stood there. I was like, did that just happen? Oh, my word. Now, listen. Everybody really listen to me here. I know Uncle Carl had cancer and you prayed for him and he died. Yeah, I know. And somebody's baby had meningitis and you prayed for him and he died. Okay? And like, I know you were sitting there one day and you go, okay, if God, if you're real, show me a sign. And like, there was no like words painted across the sky. And you're like, well, okay, so I don't know if God is real. You know what? It only takes one like tap on the shoulder and then you know.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's like, ignorance may be bliss, but you can't unlearn a truth. Okay. And like, you know, God does not respond to every whim and every, you know, every person that like puts, you know, lays down the gauntlet or whatever. Okay. But, you know, it only takes a couple of those experiences that are so ridiculously improbable, you know, like Vivian nailing those 2 things. Like, what are the chances of her getting both of those things right, walking up to a random stranger in a place she'd never been there before? I was kind of new myself. Okay. And so it's like from that point forward, I knew, okay, Perry, well, so the story isn't over. So the math formula, I finally figured it out 3 years later.
Wow.
It's the backbone of my 80/20 book. There's a website where you can punch numbers into it. The calculus formula itself got published in Harvard Business Review in 2018. Okay. And so that's the math formula. She also said, God is going to bless your business so you can support missions. Well, later that year, my business hit the hockey stick. The reason it hit the hockey stick was because I started teaching Google ads. And back then, Google was just this weird little company. Like, they were not the 800-pound gorilla of the internet, but they are now. And like before that all happened, I wrote a book about Google AdWords, and then it went supernova, and I just like rode the thing. And then a couple years later, I look back at these old emails and I figured out that 3 days before I met Vivian, I got invited to speak at a Google AdWords seminar or an internet marketing seminar. Like, we need somebody on Google AdWords. And I told him a name of a guy, and the guy turned him down, and he came back and said, I think you should do it. Okay. So like, I've got this story. And so I've told this story hundreds of times to my customers. And I've told a lot of other similar stories because I've had these things happen to me over and over and over and over and over. I mean, I could tell stories for hours like this, okay, and they're real. And in some cases, I have documentation that the stuff actually happened, and I can go back into a notebook. It's like, well, I got this, and then look what happened. So I've got a ton of this stuff. And so we started doing these experiments. And what we did was, the first experiment was, well, 10 years later, when I published 80/20 Sales and Marketing, I went and hunted Vivian down until I found her. And I said, hey, I'd like to try an experiment. I want to do a webinar. I want to get you and this other similarly gifted lady. And what we're going to do, we're going to get 30 people on a webinar. I'm going to read you their first name, and you're going to like give them a word, go. And let's see how that works. It was just a crazy experiment. So we did. And so I got Aaron and Vivian, and I go, John F., go. And then they would go. And then they would get done. And then I go, Gary C., go. And then they would do Gary C. And they, then they would do Susan M., and we would just go on. And people sit there and they type in the chat box. They're like, this is unreal. Like, how do they know this stuff? It's like they're reading me my diary. And so that became a part and parcel of our Renaissance Club. So if you're a member of Renaissance Club, which is a marketing membership with newsletters and membership bonuses, like, and discounts and all this other stuff, well, you also get to be on a memo from the head office call every month. So now we have them like every week because we have so many people that want to be on them that we have to kind of ration it out. And so we also do live events called memos from the head office. So like, we had one about a month ago in December in Chicago. It's like, hey, come to Chicago. We'll have a one-day thing. And so like, I got these 4 prophetic people, go, right? And so we did all this stuff, and and then people get all this encouragement and course corrections and everything like that. And then a lot of the customers, they hire the memos people to do private sessions with them on Skype and stuff like that. And so we have this whole little subculture. And one of the things I like about it is I do not expect or require people to embrace Christian faith or anything like that in order to participate in these things. At the last one, we had a Buddhist guy. He came and he loved it. And like, we don't violate people's boundaries. And I feel like in a lot of ways, Christianity has been reduced to this fire insurance policy where people are running around trying to get you to say the sinner's prayer thing, and it just feels ridiculously manipulative. And what I feel like is it's not even so much about that. It's about having an inner attitude where you are open to hearing from the head office in whatever manner that the head office is able to speak with you. And then your job as a human being is to go transmit that to other people in the world, and to love other people, and to be excellent, and to be really good at what you do. You know, like there's a story about the Queen of Sheba going to visit Solomon, and it says something like, and when she saw the way that his servants were all organized, and the tables and the chairs and the place settings, and it was almost like the fine details of how he ran the whole place, like right down to like the silverware. She was like, oh my goodness, this guy is divinely blessed. Okay, and like, I think there's a lot of people that are they're trying to go out and like sell Christian fire insurance, and you know, their work is mediocre, their books are mediocre, their music is mediocre, their business is mediocre, their marketing is mediocre, their product is mediocre, and nobody respects them. You know, it's like, you know, you can honor God by just being incredibly good at what you do, and by looking at all of your exploration and adventures in the world as this act of worship. You know, it's like even the word worship is all bastardized. Like, people think worship is singing Jesus, I love Jesus, Jesus is my boyfriend songs in, you know, in a building with a pipe organ or something. Like, no, like, you know, it could be standing on a cliff in front of the ocean and feeling insignificant.